Welcome to the Westminster Effects Doxology podcast. We explore popular practices, songs, and ideas in the modern church world in the light of Sola Scriptura and Toto Scriptura. I'm Cody Fields, the president of Westminster Effects. Go buy stuff for your guitar at westminstereffects.com and join the discussion in the Westminster Effects Doxology podcast lounge on Facebook. Make sure you subscribe and comment and share the show, and you know the drill by now if you've ever listened to a podcast in your life. This is episode number 2 from the Fight, Laugh, Feast conference, and I am joined by one Jason Farley. Jason, welcome to the Doxology podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's been a fun conference, and
it has.
Fun
and
to jump on
and we're like, what, 12 hours in properly?
Something like that. It feels about 30,
Yeah.
but just because they pack the fun in here.
Yeah, exactly. Were you at the after party last night?
I was. We closed it out.
Yeah.
I got the very last pizza.
You got the old, y'all ain't got to go home.
Yeah, but you can't stay here.
Yeah. And that was, it's these things you have to, it's obligatory. You stay up too late and wake up too early.
Right.
So everybody's just kind of a zombie now. And I'm here for it, right?
Right. I can feel that I chose too strong of a cigar for the end of the night last night because I could still feel it in my throat.
Oh, man.
That might have been one notch too high for me.
It just makes the voice a little extra gravelly and epic, right?
Good morning to Barry White.
You should have had a second one so you could do your best Wilford Brimley.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
So
actually, I'd probably be White Barry, not Barry White. But
that's awesome. So man of many hats, right? You are involved. What's your position with Lore?
I'm chief content officer, so okay. I do the acquisitions, go find the artists that we can find to give the freedom to love God and make what they want on a platform that that lets Christian filmmakers be free to work in any genre and serve whatever audience they can find.
Yeah, so your motto, or at least the one on the sticker in front of me, is Christian movies shouldn't suck.
Yeah.
I think I had a friend, we've kind of lost touch recently, but we used to intentionally watch bad movies together.
Yeah.
Stuff like The Room.
Oh, man.
You're tearing me apart, Lisa. Or Titanic 2.
Okay. The sequel to Titanic.
Yeah. Just vanity projects that went horrible.
Yeah.
But we also delved into a couple of Christian movies intentionally.
Which often are just vanity projects that went horrible.
Also, yes. And so we watched the Christian Mingle movie.
Oh, I have not seen it, but that sounds amazing.
And it's the typical Christian romance story of, girl falls in love with a guy who isn't saved, he hasn't prayed the prayer, etc. Right. And I think my favorite scene from that is, they've started to kind of date, he started to go to church, and her family invites him to go to lunch with them after church to Steak and Cake. And they're sitting around this table with ribeyes and cake. And that's the entire scene. And it's just so absurd. But this is what you're trying to prevent, at least in a non-satirical way.
Right, yeah, because we do have a rom-com in the works called The Lesbian and the Lumberjack. About a woman who thinks she's a lesbian, but it turns out she's just never met a real man. So.
Oh, no.
But it's a satirical rom-com.
This needs to happen.
Yeah.
This absolutely needs to happen. So what's kind of the basis for Lore, other than the fact that most Christian entertainment's terrible? Let's make it better. I'm seeing kind of some crowdfunding stuff on the website. Yeah. What's the deal with all of this?
So our we've got a bunch of taglines. But our other one is fund what Holly wouldn't. Right?
Yeah.
So
wordplays, I'm here for it. All of my pedal descriptions are stupid theology puns.
No, they're amazing.
Yeah,
they're amazing. I love the 1689.
Yes.
And I'm a Presbyterian, and I love the 1689 pedal. That's so good.
Yeah, and I told you yesterday, most Presbyterians just roll their eyes when they hear that joke. A couple of years ago, Doug Wilson stopped by, and he's like, "What's this about?" And I told him, and he chuckled, and I gave that line. Most Presbyterians rolled their eyes. He said, "Oh, I'm rolling them on the inside."
But what we have found is that there's Christian filmmakers out there that want to make all sorts of movies.
Right.
They don't want to just make another Hallmark movie and another movie about a dog and a horse and a little girl with cancer and But there isn't a funding mechanism, and that's because the funding still comes from Hollywood, and they've figured out how to pay us to stay in our lane. Right?
And a lot of the lane is kind of a bait and switch. We're going to give you this sappy story, or this is totally an apologetic movie, and it ends up being just kind of, hey, bring your unsaved friend and make them pray the prayer at the end of the movie kind of
exactly.
thing.
And that's because they're trying, what they're actually aiming at is to get the pastors to buy out theaters with tithe money, right? So they're fleecing the sheep to keep their movie career going. And
brilliant in terms of making money.
Oh yeah, right. It's
maybe not so much. It's ethically before God, all that kind of stuff.
When you have to answer for it, God might be rolling His eyes at you as you get to the gates, and you don't want that.
Yeah.
Right. So, but there's all these filmmakers that would love to serve an audience, and they want to make a movie that people want to see, or that they think people will want to see. And that's the goal, right? They're not trying to just make propaganda for the kingdom. They're trying to make a good, solid movie, an artistic movie.
Right.
And in every different genre, we've found filmmakers that want to make sci-fi, Christian filmmakers that want to make horror movies, want to make action movies, want to make dramas and comedies and all sorts of things. But the funding isn't there. What we've also found is the audience doesn't want to see another Hallmark movie.
Right.
They don't mind a Christmas movie at Christmas, but they don't want Christmas movies all year round. Right. I mean, there are some people, and that's fine. There's actually
you have to give that caveat in modern evangelical. Well, there's somebody.
There's
somebody. There's always an exception. It's like, come on, dude. We can talk in generalities.
Well, but a friend of mine who's a great dude. He just started a streaming service that's all Christmas movies all year round, right? and he's just like, well, there's people that want it, and so he started it, and people signed up, which is awesome. But most of the population, they want a variety of different genres, and they don't want to be surprised with nudity or something that the stories that actively hate them, right? And so we're trying to connect the filmmakers and the audience with a platform that gives the audience the power to say, this is the project that we want to see on the streaming service. So the audience votes with their with their subscription. They get the ability to vote and help decide what things go onto the platform.
Yeah.
So it's a crowd chosen streaming service, a crowd-built streaming service.
Yeah, and I'm on that page right now, and you have stuff that's kind of lagging behind where maybe people aren't interested, or maybe they're not interested yet.
Right.
Yeah. You have stuff where a few episodes have been funded. You've got stuff where it's like right on the cusp.
Yep.
This barely biblical is. I think I saw last year they did like a pilot or something at the conference, and it was hilarious.
Right.
So for those not looking at my phone, which is literally everyone in the world but me, the description is an animated kids show where teddy bears retell epic Bible stories with all the violence of the source material, but it's okay because they're teddy bears.
Right, exactly.
And so you've got the screen, or the thumbnail is one teddy bear disemboweling another.
Yeah.
But it's all just stuffing coming out.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so the scene with Shamgar is hilarious. It's like a wave of fluff as he's killing the 600 Philistines, right? So you just got like and this is a filmmaker who he had, when he was having kids, he had all boys, and they wouldn't watch a single Christian cartoon because it was all for girls. And so he said, and he was an animator for Phineas and Ferb and Mickey Mouse, and he was like, I gotta solve this problem.
Bringing in, like, you talk about Phineas and Ferb, that's like a big name IP,
right? Yeah, and it was one of the greatest animated shows of all time, in my opinion. It's hilarious. It's really well done. The writing's fantastic, and so he said, I've got to solve this problem. Make something that boys will want to watch. And he said, boys. And he knew that his boys loved reading the Old Testament, or when they read the stories.
Right.
But he said, he said, I couldn't just put up like a hyper-violent Samson or something.
David and all of the foreskins he collected.
Right. Yeah. So he said,
the story with Oh, I'm blanking in Genesis where the entire town gets circumcised.
Yeah, right.
And then they're all murdered.
Right. Where he uses the circumcision to kill all the neighbors.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can't tell those stories unless you tell them with teddy bears, right? And so he's fantastic, hilarious writer. You've got him, and then Chris Savino's working on that project too. Just the producer of Powerpuff Girls and
wow, yeah.
And my gym partner's a monkey, and Dexter's Laboratory. Creator of Loud House. You've just got these brilliant filmmakers,
right?
Who love the Lord and love kids, and so they're making this show that I think could be, ought to be, the next VeggieTales in terms of popularity,
right?
Because it's hilarious, it's super well done, and it's teaching you the Bible. So.
It really, it's kind of the same vein as, I don't know if you've ever heard in the Christian music industry of Becky.
No.
Where, this is a real thing, I'm not making this up, is in the Christian music industry, there are artists who will be told, that song is way too deep. You have to write for Becky. Becky is a 34-year-old soccer mom of 3 kids. She's stressed out of her mind because one of them just spilled Cheerios all over the backseat. The other one's late for soccer practice. Make her feel good about her life with your Christian song. That's their entire target demographic.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the same thing with Christian movies, is instead of, hey, go get the men, and yes, absolutely, we can make a rom-com for the ladies and stuff like that, but go get the men.
Right.
Right.
Well, and that's what we say. Our demographic, we say it's the 16 to 45-year-old male that doesn't want to see strangers naked.
Right.
Yeah,
yes.
So it's there, and there's a lot of those guys out there. There's millions.
Yeah, myself included.
Right. Yeah. And
I'm tired of having to duck my eyes down if I'm watching Netflix. I've actually gotten to the point where I'll go to IMDb or whatever and look at the criminal guides. I'm tired of seeing randos just parade across the screen.
Right. And that's the the actors and the actresses, they're not the ones pushing for it.
Right.
The directors aren't the ones pushing for it.
Yep.
It's the producers that say, well, here's our formula.
Yep.
We got to, this is how we're going to draw the audience in. And if you make great content, and the reality is, on average, PG movies make 3 times as much as rated R movies.
Really? I did not know that.
So it's not simply money.
Right.
It's
there's some kind of messaging there.
It's the way that they think about the demographics, right? So they say,
right.
Well, there's fewer of these people, but this is how you go get them. But the reality is, it's not the that really, when it comes down to serving an audience, it's about telling great stories.
Yeah, that's true.
And so we're trying to find those filmmakers that want to just tell great stories, right?
Yeah.
They just want to love God, tell great stories, serve an audience. They're not worried about, they're not trying to, fit into the current Christian market,
right?
Because there isn't a place for them. So they're
not pulling the punch, not sanitizing. Yeah. Well, of course, depending on the filmmaker, because you might have a different audience.
And that's the thing, is giving the filmmakers the freedom to make the art that they want by presenting it to the audience in advance and saying, is this art you want to see? Mm-hmm. What that does is, if you've got somebody that says, hey, I'm going to pull no punches, these are the stories I'm going to tell, and the audience says, ooh, no, that's a little too much for me, then it doesn't get made.
Right.
But if they come and they say, here's a story I want to tell, here's, there's going to be violence, and this is why, and the audience says, I get it. Yes, let's do that.
Having the reason for the violence, not just gratuitous, saw stuff like that.
Exactly.
One of the other gripes I've had in a specific instance on a Christian movie was the Chronicles of Narnia, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where Aslan tells Peter, clean off your sword, and his sword is not just still clean, it's still gleaming.
Right, yeah.
Right? It does not look like he's run anyone through.
Yeah, there's you clean off your sword, which is in the book.
Right.
Yes, that's
because it needed to be cleaned off, because he was just killing people with it.
Just killed a wolf. Yeah, just kidding. You got werewolf blood all over that sword. Let's get it cleaned off.
Yeah, yeah, and instead it's clean off your sword. Why?
Yeah. All I did was swing it through the air a few times.
And I'm not advocating for disemboweled woodland creatures of Narnia, but just a little realism, maybe a little bit. So that's fantastic. How can people find Lore?
Yeah, Lore TV, LOOR.TV. We're launched. We're up and running. Our first wave of content is up there right now, and they can go on there, and there's a 7-day free trial, and then hopefully they like what they see and they can get a subscription.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things we were planning on talking about is Knox Unplugged.
Yeah.
That's become, honestly, one of my favorite podcasts recently.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks so much.
It's one of those where, I don't know, what is the project of Knox Unplugged? Like, you've worked through Dante.
So,
there's a lot of things going on here.
Yeah. So, David Shannon and I have been friends for a long time, and we've been having these conversations about metaphysics and cosmology and the relationship between our assumed cosmology, which means our understanding of what kind of place we find ourselves in, that our assumed cosmology has on us through our imagination, right? So we have this imaginative framework that we carry around with us that has to do with what kind of world we expect to find. And so we end up seeing and not seeing often things that are right in front of us or right in the text when we're reading the Bible, and we end up not seeing things because our imagination doesn't have a place for them to rest, to lodge, right? And so things just slip right past us. And
we American Christians we often revert to materialism.
Yeah, materialism with some sort of transcendental democracy, right? We're transcendental.
I'm using that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and because it's a materialism, but there's still a spirituality, but the spirituality is inside of us and it's individual,
right?
And then a group of individuals then make decisions about society, right?
Yeah.
So, and that assumption, it's invisible to most of us because it's shared, right? And so until you get out and get into conversation with some older authors, usually, you don't see it.
Right. It's particularly pre-Darwin authors.
Right.
You got to get at least 1700s at that point.
Right. At least, yeah.
But then even then, they're butting up against the Enlightenment a lot of times.
Yeah. So the it was like 16th century or 17th century and before, you have a very different cosmology. And it's not that cosmology is all right and ours is all wrong or something like that.
Right.
But it helps reveal our assumptions, right? And so we've been having these conversations, and then, lost my headphones. We've been having those conversations.
It wasn't me knocking a microphone off this time. It's normally my fault when something goes wrong.
And David just said, well, hey, I'm starting this new podcast, Knox Unplugged. Come in and do the first episode. And now we're
come in and do the second episode.
Yeah, now we're like 60 episodes in to come in and do the first episode.
And it's basically just you recording conversations that you're already
having. Yeah, we record about 50% of our conversations for each week.
Yeah, right? there's not like a stinger intro or anything. It's you just start talking.
Well, and David doesn't warn me about. So we jump on the recording, and they cut it in wherever they think is the right spot.
Interesting.
So we don't always. So we've been talking for a little bit before the recording begins.
That's a really interesting concept.
Yeah,
and neither of you know. So it's like a double blind study then.
Yeah. And so like the very first one, we were like 5 minutes in before I even realized the recording was going because he didn't warn me, and I was like, you got to warn me. I just recorded stuff that I wouldn't have ever said on a recording. Right. He said, that's the point.
That's the entire point.
But yeah, I've been grateful for the response that people have found it helpful. I think it's because there's not many places where you can go to discuss the discipleship of your imagination.
Yeah,
right? And we want to bring everything we are to Christ and be discipled and transformed everywhere and restored, restored to who God intended us to be. and be sanctified, and but our imagination often doesn't get the sanctification treatment.
Right.
Yeah, and
right.
so I think that conversation has been it's been useful and helpful to people, which is great.
You even have like this kind of latent materialism even amongst our Pentecostal and charismatic friends, where even though there's a demon behind every bush and under every rock, and that's the source of every single problem in your life, like that's it.
Right.
Right? It's only the demon or the material, where we Reformed types often revert in reaction to that, to straight materialism, and yes, God's sovereign and he just made the material thing happen and that's all.
Right. Yeah. That God's sovereignty is something that started the chain of events, but the chain of events is a cause and effect system.
Right.
Yeah.
Man, that's good.
Whereas, John Calvin, one of the insults that used to be leveled at him by the Roman Catholics was that he was obsessed with the Holy Spirit. Right. Because he saw that the Spirit was everywhere, active.
Yes.
Right. So that in his commentary on Ezekiel, he's got this really interesting discussion about the angels, the angel throne that God rides on.
This is in the neighborhood of 37, 38.
Yeah. He's there talking.
You mean that's not about Israel's war right now?
See, I don't even read the news. This is a problem.
I don't hold that against you. You're honestly, like, I'm a news junkie, and I will say you're better for it.
Yeah, but he has this discussion about the cause and effect between the spirit world and the material world.
Yeah.
And he mentions just sort of like our mind. How is it that our mind moves our body, right? And he says there has to be some sort of spiritual intermediary, because matter can't move on its own. Right. That unless there's spirit.
Neil deGrasse Tyson just threw up on the floor hearing
exactly,
that.
Right? And so we have that inverted. We've completely inverted that. Now, we can debate whether he's right or we're right, but we should know the assumption that we bring. Like, perhaps we have our understanding of cause and effect is biblical and it's the right one, but we should know that it's something that we bring with us as an assumption as we go around, and not be unaware of the way that our imagination has been landscaped by the world that we grew up in.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and having our minds sculpted by the Bible and particularly how they understood it.
Right.
Like, that's kind of been a project of mine this year, whether it's through Knox Unplugged or reading, for all of his foibles, Michael Heiser. There are valuable things in there, even though there are times, I've said this on the podcast before, but there are times where it's like I'm tracking, and then something comes out of left field, and by out of left field I mean someone comes over the green monster in Fenway on a parachute while streaking.
Right. Yeah. And you're like, oh, that might not be the
maybe a little much.
Yeah, but if we're not reading stuff that's challenging us, to think and to learn, and I think that's what that was his project is.
Right.
I really want to fully submit my cosmology to the scriptures.
Right. And I want to change my mind. Like, people accuse me every now and then of, you always think you're right. And it's like, you do too.
Right, yeah.
But if I
thought I was wrong about something, I'd change my mind there and
exactly.
be right.
And then be right again. But I want to, have arguments with people and lose. Yeah. Because either I dig down on that and discover, no, I really was right and I just argued it poorly, or, man, I really was that wrong. So whether it's reading Heiser or someone, I don't know, a Presbyterian, if I don't think I'll be convinced of paedobaptism, but let's say I am, well, then I've changed my mind to become more faithful, right?
Right, yeah. And I think that's that as Christians, we just shouldn't be living in fear, right? We should be confident that when God says that he will bring us, that the Spirit is with us and he's bringing us to fruition, right? He's bringing us to the person that he created us to be, that because of that, we don't have to wander around afraid. We can interact with all sorts of things. And if we discover we're wrong, then we say, if it was wrong in a sinful way, we say, oh, Father in heaven, please forgive us. Forgive me, that was a sin. And he forgives us because Jesus died for us.
Right.
And if we discover that we were just wrong about some, a theological point or something, and it's not a sinful thing, then we change our mind and say, thank you, Lord, for the new light.
Right.
I'm
exactly.
grateful for that.
Exactly. I don't have a professional way to transition into this. There was probably a moment 10 minutes ago, but you got into some hot water several months ago.
Yeah.
So
the frog got boiled to a crisp.
Yeah. So let's just ask this in the worst way possible.
Do it.
Jason, I'm a Baptist. Why are you blaming me for transgenderism?
Oh, yeah, appreciate that. No, this was a funny situation that I will probably never live down.
Right.
Where David and I were talking about where did this understanding that you can choose your identity come from?
Right.
And I said, well, you know where it came from, David. And he's like, no. He's like, it seems like it came out of left field. I was like, David, you were raised in a Baptist context, right? You never heard anybody say something like, God's made his vote, the devil's made his vote. And he was like, oh. He said, don't say anything else. Let me get the recording started. And he called back. So it was a setup. David knew what he was doing. I was like, and I just ignorant. I'm like, David has my best in mind at heart. And so and then somebody clipped me saying that Baptists caused transgenderism into like a 2.5 second clip, and it was shared like 100,000 times.
Because of course they did.
Right. So, but what the point that I was making is that right now in American Christianity, most of the churches that you run into, the Baptist churches that you run into, have a view of identity that the most fundamental thing about us, our religion, that gives us our identity, is something that we choose.
Right. And you don't mean specifically SBC Baptist. You mean the overall umbrella.
American, yeah.
And the Credo Baptist, megachurch, seeker-sensitive style Baptist.
Right. But that is the largest group, right?
Exactly.
It's the loudest group. And so, my entire extended family are Reformed Charismatic Baptists, right? And they love the Lord. Their kids love the Lord. We have a great time when we hang out. I've had my cousin as a pastor for a while, who's a Reformed Charismatic, and where my family went to church there, and it was great.
By Reformed Charismatic, kind of along the lines of like a Sam Storms-ish?
I don't know that world much, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But they love the scriptures.
I mainly know that world because of dealing with worship guitarists and stuff like that.
Yeah, they read a lot of Puritans, and there was wonderful Christians, great churches but they're in the minority, right? Within the American church, the majority is the will of man is the thing that the will of man is the source of identity.
Right.
And it's a French existentialist, American transcendentalism. That's where all of that comes from. And we've just sort of swallowed it, and then the worldliness aspect of it in the American church is that they give us the world provides for us our mission, and we use Jesus to accomplish that mission.
We try and baptize that.
Right. So that's what I was talking about, and a lot of people got it. More people didn't. And But I also, if all you saw was the clip, then it is what it is.
When I first heard it, I burst out laughing because I heard it in its context, and one, I totally agreed, and then two, I knew exactly what the internet was going to do with that. It was kind of like in Star Wars when Obi-Wan senses billions of voices crying out in terror, and all of a sudden they're silenced when the Death Star blows up Alderaan. It's like, that's the reformed pub right now. And then so I burst out laughing. I knew the context, and then I told my wife, who didn't have the context, and she had the exact reaction. Everyone on the she's like, no, he's full of crap. What is he talking about?
Well, and here's the thing, I am full of crap. That's not up for debate.
You and me both.
That night, my wife printed off a bunch of the things people were saying about me on Twitter and read it to my kids, and my kids were laughing so hard.
That's amazing.
So we had a good laugh about it, and because it's not. I don't think I'm particularly important or take myself very seriously.
Yeah.
So I was like, and also, it's also made me stop when I see somebody say like, wow, look at this guy, and you see just a clip and think, I need a little bit more context. But then sometimes you look at the more context and you're like, whoa, Andy Stanley was worse than I thought.
He's even worse. Yeah,
that's even worse.
Yeah, we often forget with those kind of things, like we're dealing with real people. Even if we're talking about someone like Nancy Pelosi or Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama, like they are actual people who have their own, pros and cons and whatever, all made in the image of God.
Yeah.
This is my journalism degree coming out. The journalism degree meeting Christianity of bearing true witness. Stop taking people out of context kind of thing is like, I'm really big on that. And, even though I would not trust, certain people with policies or to pastor a church like Andy Stanley.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't
he
let
is still
Nancy Pelosi watch my dog while I was out of town.
Yeah, exactly. And, God forbid, Hillary Clinton watch your dog or he'll kill himself. But, they are all made in the image of God, so let's bear true witness, and it might justify them or it might make it worse.
Yeah, make it worse, yeah. But the thing that, the biggest thing that I learned was that the Baptists have the strongest meme game of any
That's true.
group in the world.
That is true.
There was some, I saved, what's really funny is a couple of my son was 16, 17 at the time, and he got some texts from friends who were like, why is your dad showing up on all of my favorite meme pages? Right, but it was because the meme quality was so good on that controversy. I was like, man, I think those Baptists might be right, because their meme game is way better than mine.
That's hilarious. This is a great way to establish what you believe is how good that party's meme game is. So Baptists, we got to admit, the post-millennial guys have the meme game on lock.
They do.
The left can't meme.
No.
Arminians can't meme. Pentecostals can't meme. So, you're basically left with Reformed, Baptist, and post-millennial if you're going by memes.
Right, yeah. And so I was very impressed, and I have a folder in my phone saved all of my favorite memes.
That's amazing.
Making fun of me.
That's amazing. I've been memed a couple of times in the podcast group about the cease and desist that I've gotten, and particularly I used to have a lip ring right after college. I went to an SBC college, and my parents told me that they would stop paying for things if I got piercings and tattoos. So of course I started with tattoos on my chest so they wouldn't see them.
My tattoos were all under the t-shirt too. So
right. And so I had a lip ring, and when I met my wife, I had the lip ring, and then several years ago I took it out, and she cried for 30 minutes because she's sentimental and stuff like that, and I get it. But it's turned into an entire meme of all they have to do is hashtag BBTLR for bring back the lip ring that my wife started, and everybody just gives me crap about it all the time.
Oh, that's incredible.
The memes are fantastic. Yeah. So and memes are a love language, by the way.
They are. Well, and I think it's I'm not afraid of the conversation. I think it's something that's worth having. And I've talked to Baptists that still disagree with me, but have said, what I appreciated was it forced me to ask questions that I didn't know the answers to.
Yeah.
And my understanding of the sacraments as a Baptist is deeper now because I had to dig in and say, wait a second, what about this? What about that? Right. And because.
Well, and if a Baptist is using the language of sacrament versus ordinances, that's a win already, right? Like that's actually where my church is.
I hadn't even thought about that, but you're right.
Yeah, that's where my church is, where I'm a deacon is, and we actually just approved new bylaws like a month and a half, 2 months ago. And we are using the language of sacraments because we see in Scripture it's not simply an ordinance. It is an ordinance, but it's more than that.
Right.
Like there is grace involved here. It's not saving grace, but there is grace involved. So let's call it what it is.
And I just as a historic Protestant, I want I think there's an ecclesiology where Presbyterians and Baptists can have fellowship, not just at a personal level, but at a church level, and even within a city, be able to have an ecclesiology where we have official fellowship, like real fellowship, real institutional fellowship. But I don't think it's there if we can't have conversations about things. Right. So.
And that's where things like Fight, Laugh, Feast is so beneficial, and even to some extent G3. But here at Fight, Laugh, Feast, like we will dog on each other. All day.
Right. And I think that's what men do when they are friends, right? When they're really in fellowship.
Yeah. We understand that we're going to hang out for eternity together.
Right. Yeah. And so these little differences, that I think. That I think are worth talking about, but worth talking about like men, right? We don't.
And men, when they like each other, make fun of each other relentlessly.
Exactly, right? Yeah. My kids are. Now a couple of them are teenagers, but we've got 3 adult children, and so we've got a family group chat, and it gets hilarious in there when the kids start throwing memes at each other and gifs and stuff. And it's just but it's because there's a safety in the fellowship. Like there's no threat that the fellowship is not fragile.
Right.
And because of that, we can joke around. I'm married to a comedian, so she's the funniest person I know, and so she will say things like, my son was going to the doctor for like a nodule thing that he'd found, and it's like, well, what if it's cancer? And and my wife just said, one less mouth to feed, right? But
that honestly reminds me of my wife. She has a straight up gallows sense of humor. It's amazing.
And it's so funny. And my kids all laughed because everybody knows the fellowship, there's no fragility at all to the fellowship, right? So we have hard conversations with our kids. We have hard conversations in our house. We wrestle through things together. And because the fellowship is secure, you can do that, right? And I do think that on a broad scale, the Presbyterian Baptist fellowship isn't as secure as it ought to be.
Yeah,
and it ought to be a lot more secure, and it's not. And I think there's a tribalism that we just need to repent of and understand that the reality is that the Holy Spirit is the one who tells us who our brothers and sisters are, and the only mark of is faith. Right, that's the mark.
Yeah,
and we want to make it something else, and that's always been our temptation. And
whether that's Baptist or Presbyterian or post-mill theonomic versus R2K Amil,
right? Yeah,
whatever.
We should, all of it. All of those conversations we should be having as conversations, right? These are the conversations that we have, and I actually really appreciate Lewis's take on mere Christianity, right? That when you meet somebody that loves Jesus, you don't say, you love Jesus, but are you in my group, right? Like,
right.
I had I worked the night shift at a gasket factory that had a Vietnamese translator on that shift. And so there was a lot of Vietnamese immigrants. It was a Christian-owned company, and so they did a lot to take care of the immigrants of the city. And one of the things that happened was this old Vietnamese gentleman, he heard I was a Christian, so he came over and he said, I hear you're a Christian. And he didn't speak English. I didn't speak Vietnamese. I said, yes. And he said, you believe Jesus is only way? And he gave me this theological exam. I said, yes, I do. He said, you believe he is king of all? I said, yes, I do. Yes, I do. He's like, okay. And he said, you, me, same. Them, different. Right? Right? And he was a Vietnamese Roman Catholic, but really loved the Lord. But he was checking if I was evangelical enough to be his,
like actually a
right,
Christian.
Actually, I actually believed.
Right.
And we had a great fellowship, even though we didn't speak the same language. We would eat lunch together, and we would try and have conversations.
Yeah.
But he knew that if I loved the Lord and he loved the Lord, that was where the separation was between us and everybody else.
Right.
And I think that is an understanding that that salvation by faith alone should give us.
Yeah.
But we, our temptation is always to add something.
Right. Where we want to add, the belief that salvation is only by faith,
right.
Which is actually adding to salvation by faith alone.
Right. Yeah.
Even at least to the same level as believing, sacramentalism gets you saved, or that praying a prayer gets you saved, or like I grew up Church of Christ.
Okay, yeah.
And so not just baptismal regeneration, but baptismal justification. Right. And so, are there people in the Church of Christ who really legitimately love Jesus and are going to hang out with us in the resurrection? Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right.
Are there really harmful things about some of their teaching? Yes. And we can be honest about those things.
Right.
And we can have the conversation, or sometimes we might need to throw down a little bit, maybe take the gloves off. But
and I'm sure when Jesus went after the Pharisees, that there were Pharisees in the group that were like, yeah, he's got us there. Right? Yeah, he's got us pinned. Right.
Well, there were accounts of I don't remember exactly what the question was, but they turned around and said, "Yeah, well, was John the Baptist actually from God?"
Right. Yeah.
We don't know. Then I'm not going to answer your question.
I'm not going to answer your question. Right. So yeah, but salvation is by faith, right? The only way to keep covenant with God is by faith.
Yes.
There's not another way.
And he gifts that in the first place.
Right. Exactly.
Ephesians.
So I think that's where I think we need to do a better job of believing our own theology, and then we can have fellowship with one another.
Awesome. Well, remind the people where they can find you again.
Yeah. So Loor TV, LOOR.TV. Knox Unplugged, wherever you get your podcast.
Which I think includes YouTube as well now, right?
Yep. We're on YouTube now as well, and we're part of the Fight, Laugh, Feast podcast network. So there's a bunch of podcasts that work together there, and
Yeah, fantastic. Jason, thanks for coming on the Doxology podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And to all of you out in podcast world, go love God, love your neighbor, and make some music. We'll see you next time.